I'm very much looking forward to discussing the topic of redefining fashion culture from fast desires to true pleasures and beauty. During the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the bigger picture of changing societal values and consumption habits. What are going to be the key drivers in creating sustained change and redefining fashion culture and its role in today's society? That's what I'm looking forward to discussing with the panelists who I'm going to introduce to you in just a minute. But I want to say before that you're all invited to this discussion. We will be accepting your questions and your comments via the chat. So please keep them coming. And also please share the conversation that we're having publicly. You can use the hashtag 202030, or if it's going to be a very short tweet or post, the long one, 202030, the Berlin Fashion Summit. So I have three fabulous panelists here with me to debate the topic I've just introduced, and I want to give them each a personal introduction now. Firstly, I would like to welcome Melissa Drier, who is a native New Yorker and long-term Berliner. Melissa is an iconic fashion journalist whose career has spanned more being long-term correspondent for Women's Wear Daily. And yeah, she believes that the aspects of sustainability and responsibility and methods of sourcing, production, marketing, and consumption are no longer just happening on the sidelines of the conversation. At the same time, it's important for Melissa that sustainable fashion by nature has to be an integral design or fashion product and not something not beautiful. So very much part of the topic of the conversation we're having today. And looking forward to hearing her position on that in just a minute. Secondly, I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Renate Strauss, who is an assistant professor at the Fashion Studies at the American University in Paris, as well as at the University of Arts here in Berlin, where she teaches fashion theory and cultural history. Renate's teaching and scholarship lies on the intersection of sociology, politics, fashion, and dress, including examining the relationship between dress and identity, fashion under socialism, the emotional and sensory impact of dress and fashion in a sustainable world. And in case you haven't had enough content and food for thought today, Renate is also co-founder of Fashion is a Great Teacher, which is a platform but also a podcast you can listen to. So lovely to have you here with us, Renate. And last but not least, I would like to introduce to the panel Rune Orloff, whose company, Pool, you've just seen introduced in the demo that was just happening prior to our session. So Rune is Pool's CEO, the constant focus and view on how to grow Pool and how to grow its impact. Rune is also leading all the external partnerships, as well as ensuring that the world knows about Pool by being present in panels such as today and spreading the word about the company. Prior to Pool, Rune was the former commercial director of the luxury eyewear brand Mikita and has been leading the growth of other fashion companies like Henrik, Bischoff. And it's great to have you here with us today as well. Welcome, all three of you, to this panel. I would like to kick off the discussion. Some of you might know I come a bit more from a tech world. And of course, during the last year, we have discussed at length how the pandemic has been a driver in the digitization of all kinds of industries. Of course, we've also been discussing how the pandemic has maybe been changing our consumption habits and the values that we really have in our lives. So I'd like to kick it off by asking you, Melissa, do you think that COVID has been a turning point? Has it altered fundamental needs that fashion is responding to in today's society?
All I can say is we shall see. I mean, if it means jogging pants are here to stay, oh God, I had hoped they were leaving. But, I mean, one reads a lot that people have culled their wardrobes, have gone through their wardrobes, are finding new relationships with what they already own. That could be a very, very good thing. But we've all been put on hold. I mean, it's very hard to know. Our needs have been so curtailed. And I think I don't know how life will go back to normal, but when life's a little bit closer to normal, the needs we have are going to change dramatically, or at least I hope they will. I mean, I'm desperate to dress, but I certainly don't need to at the moment. There's absolutely nowhere for me to go. You cannot wear nice clothes in the woods. It doesn't work. So
I was very excited getting dressed up for today's panel because it meant wearing real pants and putting on a blazer. So I feel you. I read an interesting quote in an article that was published by BBC, I think in September, or at least it sparked something with me, by Caroline Stevenson, who said, clothes will become more of an extension of our homes, offering comfort and reliability amidst global turbulence. And I was thinking about this in the sense of like how needs for clothes changing, being protective, us all having new clothing items as in the protective masks that we're wearing now. And this sort of adding a new value to the clothes that we're going to be buying in future. Renate, do you think that this is going to be part of, a new value set to do with consumption of clothing and fashion? What does that quote spark with you?
Hopefully. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation and lovely introduction. I think, first of all, you're talking about fashion culture here. That's the name of the panel. So you're talking about the unwritten rules. Yesterday, you talked about policy, and that were the written rules. So when you talk about unwritten rules, I think it's really important to keep in mind that there's not just one fashion culture, but there are multiple fashion cultures. Just as that there's not just one fashion system, but fashion systems. So it's really hard, in a way, to answer your question and generalize across. Hopefully this pandemic will lead to new narratives around fashion, because I think we're really in need of new narratives, and this idea of less desire and more pleasure and more love for our clothing, I think is a really important one.
Yeah, because, and this is one thing that I sort of drew out of that quote, something that offers reliability or offers comfort is also something that is of quality or well made. And there's a sort of hope in that, of course, or a sort of maybe new focus in the things that we'll be producing, that we see no longer as just fashion items, but also protecting us from something in some kind of way.
But we've had cocooning before.
Go ahead.
I mean, we've been through our cocooning phase, no? Mm. This is not necessarily new. Perhaps the materials are new, but I suspect, as we mentioned, there isn't one system. I suspect we're going to have hedonism on one hand and responsibility on the other. It's going to be an interesting mix, or mixes. There will be many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have found it quite interesting to listen to some sort of general market surveys that at least make you believe like there is a chance for a mindset change of consumers looking generally for more sustainable products. But I would share your assumption that that's going to branch off into different needs and desires and not be like a unison trend. I want to bring you, of course, into the conversation, Rune, and I've been wondering how your company and your products fit into that. We've sort of, in this sort of Marie Kondo sentiment of life, I feel like in the past, buying new things has been something that people did to spark joy. And I wonder if you're in connection to Paul, thinking about how can things like repair, or especially lending or borrowing, be something that sparks joy of an equal value to buying something new?
Absolutely. We've from the beginning on said that fashion is extremely important in fashion, and it's a key part of why you join this industry as a user or as a brand. You're expressing yourself, and you can call that a culture, you can call that fashion. What was said before about responsibility, I think that's also one of the things that we talk a lot about, because it's not a definition, sustainability or responsibility, it's not one thing. So what we try to with Pool is that this is a completely new way of interacting with this industry, interacting with the culture of fashion, and the freedom to express yourself through wearing new stuff, because it is definitely become buying new things and wearing new products is generally unsustainable when you look at the way that the market is set up today. So that's kind of how we work with the aspect that it's an access over ownership, so to speak.
I would be very curious to know if you have any stats or market insights. Like, I see the use case from me personally being a moderator and not always needing to own a stage outfit I might want for a specific show or something. But do you have data on how people's readiness to own something temporarily rather than full-time has been developing?
We're a company of COVID 2020. We launched spring 2020. So I find it hard to compare this our past year to what's been happening the years before. So we don't have any concrete data. What we know is that we have a really strong interest. We are operating in Berlin. We have a really strong interest. We've done a lot of surveys and every rental sharing, re-commerce, and obviously also the subscription model that we look at. So there's strong indications from the market. That's also why we are what we are today. I don't have any specific figures that I can share at this point.
We'll get back a little bit into maybe some of the nuances of that borrowing, lending mindset and how it fits into also other parts of the fashion industry. I would like to dig a little bit deeper on that, maybe also with Renate. You teach a lot of people, a lot of the young people, I'm assuming, also are in your classes, of whether you see a sort of generational aspect to that question of mindsets around ownership and the value of experiencing something perhaps over the value of owning something.
Absolutely. I think shared economy is something which comes much more naturally to the students I teach, at least. That's a global community of students in Paris and more local in Berlin, but it seems to be across the board that shared economy, sharing instead of owning is, it's a reality really. I want to give some credit where credit is due with the name of this panel, or our subject for today, of less desire, more pleasure and love, because we had a discussion last week. Melissa was also there in a think tank to prepare this panel today to talk about fashion culture. And I brought this in inspired by Zoe Broch, the head of fashion at the Royal College of Art in London. And she gave a great talk, and she quoted Hannah Arendt, who said, "Do you know the difference between love and desire? When you desire strawberries, you eat them. When you love strawberries, you plant them." So I think Rune's work really made me remember that, because I think we need to treat fashion in a way that it isn't something that we devour, but it's something we nurture and love and share. So I think, a business approach like Pool is actually really timely for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I guess that's something that can be applied to a lot of consumerist behavior in different industries as well. Melissa, as Renate just said, you also participated in that think tank. Are there any other outcomes perhaps that you want to also share and bring into the discussion?
No, let me pass on that for the moment. Nothing specifically, because I'm glad for the quote by Hannah Arendt, because I personally, as a word person, had difficulty with the word desire that we're using. Desire, when I speak to people from, let's say, 40 up, people who desire doesn't have to be so momentary. You can desire something for a long time. And even in terms of fashion, talking to people like, yeah, I remember when I had to save, 4 months before I could buy that jacket, and how I loved that jacket when I finally got it. The difference between then and now is that things are gone in a second. Not physically, unfortunately. That's the problem. But whether they're desirable is gone. And I think one of the key themes that came up in our session was speed. It's nothing new. The industry has been talking about it for quite some time. But the speed at which people want and then don't want, the speed at which fashion is produced, the speed at which the industry seems to think it has to operate on, mostly for the sake of sales or mostly for the sake of making a buck, has gotten completely out of control. So there was a discussion of how to slow things down, which would be for the good of everybody involved.
Sorry, yeah, I think that's such an important point that you just raised, like, and the German word would be Entschleunigung, because, as you said, is the assumption that this is what is wanted, and this spiraling of the market to ever produce faster and put things out there. At the same time, humankind seems overwhelmed by the mass of everything and the information flow of everything. So it seems we're further and further spiraling into this, whilst we are in agreement that this is not a desirable state to be in. And somebody sort of needs to pull the plug. And the question is, have we already pulled the plug a little bit in the pandemic? How do we sustain those efforts? Of course, this is a very complex question. I'm not asking one of you to answer at the same time. We're already also receiving a flood of questions from the audience. I want to bring in a couple of those and maybe throw them.
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Because I don't think people want new all the time. I think newness is construction. So I think newness is a discursive construction. And I think fashion is not per se new, but we are being told that it's new. So I think it's not just being, not just pulling the plug on newness, but pulling the plug on the perception and this artificial acceleration.
I mean, the acceleration has basically made newness impossible. I have seen my entire fashion life, you can call it 6 days of fashion life. It goes past me every year. It goes in, it goes out, it goes in, it goes out. The newness is going to have to come from somewhere else. And I also don't think new has to be the main driver. We've been taught, we've been brainwashed into thinking newness is all. And so
I see you smile, Rune, because I'm guessing this resonates a lot with what you've been thinking about building up, Paul. And a question came in, so maybe we can check that one off quickly if you're going to be expanding into women's wear anytime soon.
We're building a platform that's a tech platform, but it's obviously also a tangible platform where we're offering goods. So right now we've started with menswear, and women's wear is obviously on the roadmap going forward. That's obvious. But I just wanted to quickly resonate with what we've just talked about speed, about trends coming in and out, because that's one of the things that we've worked a lot with. Because one thing is that, yes, there's a certain speed in the market, and that we're definitely focusing on, because we are a sustainable company built from the foundation up. We know that one of the biggest issues in the industry is this usage that lasts 1, 2, 3 times maximum before these items are discarded from a private perspective, and also from the overproduction in the industry and so forth. So what we said is that mass of product that sit in between your classics, your fiber ones that you wear 100 times or 1,000 times, and the masterpieces that you save up 4 months to buy. There's a huge pool of products in the middle that we cater to from where we are now, and this is that speed that we look at. And we don't offer the latest collections. We offer collections from the last years and from the last seasons, and especially from last year where there was a lot of cancelled orders and products in the market that were sort of stuck or lost. We cater with these products, and I think we offer allows people to express themselves and work with fashion, dressing up or dressing differently to engage in a way with this fast moving style and this expectation that things are moving so fast.
Yeah, one aspect of that I'm looking forward to also bringing into the panel tomorrow is that how might that create leverage to also influence how people design and produce products. If you know your product is going to have a second span of life beyond that first collection sale, and it's going to live on in services like Pool, will that be an opportunity for more qualitative production and more long-lasting products? Where do you think, where's the shift going to happen? That's always an ongoing question, of course. Maybe back over to Melissa, because one person in the chat asked, like, we've been talking about this for so many years and still the market share of sustainable fashion products is minimal looking at the overall market, although we have seen things shift and change. And it's sort of this ongoing chicken and egg situation that we're looking at. Is it going to be the consumer power that's going to shift industry, or is it going to be regulatory aspects, or is it going to be more of an industry alignment, which we've also discussed in previous conversations we've had around sustainable fashion? How do you see the chicken and egg situation?
I wish I knew. I personally, I don't want to sound anti-consumer, but a lot of the reason companies have been behaving the way they do is because they can get away with it. The consumers are supporting it. The consumers are seemingly demanding it, though I often questioned how many consumers. It seemed to have been always a sliver of rather young consumers who hopefully will grow out of this behavior. But it's in some ways, for me, an ethical problem that has to it's really, really a broad cultural problem that is being mirrored also in our fabric and in our fashion consumption. We have turned into cultures of pure consumption. And when that's the only value that's out there, and it has to be addressed somehow on the same media channels that created it. And so we are talking social media. One of my favorite bits of Berlin graffiti, you probably also know it, Rune, is it's near, it's on the Ufer. It says, "Stop making stupid people famous." Well, let's stop making stupid ideas the only idea in town. And a lot of that is happening with these quick wardrobe change artists. Why are we clapping when someone changes their clothes 18 times a day? Why isn't there a bigger outcry on the social media saying this is ridiculous and it's really not good for the planet? So there's a lot going on right now. I mean, if this panel happened before the inauguration, I might be feeling differently. It's happening after the inauguration. I'm reading things, I'm hearing things. I'm a child who went through the 60s. I was a teenager in the 60s. I lived the 60s. There is a feeling, if America doesn't completely screw up, that there is a change of mood that are really bad behavior of the last 30 to 40 years, there may be some other values coming through. And if that happens, it will also happen in the fashion industry. It's a much bigger story that's going on right now. And we're all forgetting danger to the planet. And that is going to come up right front and center as soon as Corona is somehow quieted down. So... But
Thank you. I think we're already going to slowly maneuver into something of a closing round because we're fast approaching the end of the panel. Renate, you wanted to comment on what Melissa just said?
Yes, very quickly. Something that's also come out of the think tank. What's needed is a change in perception of what fashion is, but also a change in education. Because it's not just education we need, but a certain type of education, because education has got us into the situation that we're in right now. Very intelligent people have got us into the situation we're in right now. So we really need to look at the types of education that we're proposing, and essentially at the core of the perception. And when we're talking about fashion, then the perception of fashion, which is completely unrelated to what fashion actually is.
I want to squeeze in 2 more questions before we close the panel. Picking up also on what Melissa said, the article I referenced earlier also brought in an idea that because of the digital transformations that I mentioned briefly in the opening question, there's an opportunity that sort of physical consumption is going to change to become more sustainable, and the frivolous is going to move into the digital world. So the fast changing, the extra layer, the funny pizza hat we wear on Zoom calls, that's going to be part of the digital world that's ever changing on a daily basis. Do you see that as a possible trend and also as a possible solution, or are we just moving the wasteful consumerist habits into the digital world that way, Renate?
I think the digital poses a real opportunity. I think at the moment it's used to increase social status on social media. So I'm not seeing what I'm hoping to see, for example, diversity in terms of the fashion body is something that could be greatly done in the digital. It's not yet done, but there's huge potential, and I think we can only begin to dream.
Would already be a wonderful closing statement, but I do want to bring in Rune before we close the conversation. And I want to pass you a question that actually came in from the audience, which is, if you know, or maybe based on your how you've been welcomed to the scene during the course of the past year, what's the industry's attitude toward the rise of resale platforms and interest in secondhand clothes? Is that something seen as a force for good or rather a threat to new designers? Do you have a feeling about that?
The feedback or what we hear from the brands that we work with is there's that there's a certain fear that they're not part of it. They know that it's happening, and it is lightning speed. And I think that they all fear that they're not part of it. But I think the general feedback has been that it's great to see the garments live on. I mean, they don't get lost at the back of the closet anymore. They actually live on in all these different platforms, and that's the general feedback that we've received. And I think that's also what we work on is longevity, quality, but also prolonging this lifetime of a garment, however that life is. That's amazing to see garments live a bit longer than one season.
Excellent. Well, sadly, that's already been the half hour that we had time for this debate. I have to say it's definitely been, all puns intended, a true pleasure for me to be discussing this topic with you. And I want to give a shout out and thank you to the audience and the great questions that we had coming in during the last half hour. I just want to point out before we close that if you weren't taking notes as fast as you wanted, then don't worry, there's going to be a report that we're going to send to all registered participants at the end of the summit. And if you felt this was a great discussion as I did, and you think, oh, I know people who should be participating, then you can still sign up and register for 2020-30 for the next days and be a part of the discussion. I look forward to moderating another panel tomorrow afternoon around the same time and looking more detailed at the economies and also the value chains and how they are changing currently. But again, a big thank you to you, Melissa, Renate, and Rune for joining today's debate.